jail. So I get to the city jail, and I'm still asking a question. Why am I?
Okay, I'm not gonna play the whole video. I was watching this guy, and he has a very interesting story. So I had to make a comment. Okay, it says, wow, because people were saying why he took public defenders. They assigned him attorneys. You know, some people said, why didn't he get a private attorney? But the attorneys would have came in with the same thing. They got all this on you, and you're just better off taking the deal. But they do that to everybody, and this guy's a cop. So I hope nobody calls me a bootlicker. I'm talking about the law, okay? Simply the law. You know, cops are needed in our society, but what's needed are honest cops. Cops that live up to the oath. You know, I've often saved my ass reminding police officers the penalties of violating the oath: fines, removal of public service, and incarceration, knowingly and willingly violating that oath. And then I would proceed with, depending on the situation, but most of the time they would just leave me alone. I said, wow, even with private attorney, they would still have pushed for a plea bargain. Totally ineffective assistance of counsel. Reporting misconduct is mandatory in both the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct, and failure to report is misconduct. Nobody in that case reported misconduct, so failed to cite the attorney for the defense. Sorry. Okay, where'd I, wow. Still have pushed for a plea bargain. Totally ineffective assistance of counsel. Reporting misconduct is mandatory in both the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct, and failure to report is misconduct. Nobody in that case reported misconduct, for failure to cite the attorney for the defense for ineffective assistance of counsel clearly shows the ineffectiveness of the court. The assumption of guilt is prominent first and foremost, and you must battle your way to prove your innocence. The first step is to cite everybody for misconduct, for failure to report misconduct to the proper authorities. Reporting misconduct is mandatory in both the rule of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct, and failure to report misconduct. Effective assistance of counsel guaranteed in the Sixth Amendment of the United States Constitution, and the requirements are stated in the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct, which are the legal obligations of all lawyers and judges. In part, it's part of the oath they took, and there's penalties for disinformation, usually in the form of violating the letter of the law. There's penalties for violating the letter of the law as well. There's a clear violation of the rule of law. There's penalties for violating the rule of law. They conspired to deprive him of his constitutional right under the guise of authority, unlawful authority, abuse of power, legally called a conspiracy against rights under the color of law. The DOJ Civil Rights Department is required to handle such issues, but you have to file a complaint first. I mean, they know it's going on. It's against the law, what they did to him. And deprivation of rights started with the attorneys that were supposed to be representing him. And if you read the rule of professional conduct in the preamble, it says all lawyers, when defending somebody, they are required to defend them as if it was their own life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness on the line. Did they advise him? I mean, did they get informed consent from him at any point? Informed consent requires reasonable knowledge to make an informed decision to give informed consent. And that starts with letting him know what his legal obligations to him are, and the judges and the lawyers, and that's starting with going over the rules and the codes, so that way everybody plays by the book. And it happens with everybody. He was denied a quick and speedy trial. They denied him discovery. They disallowed him to prove himself. He has records of him being at home when they were saying he was traveling out of state, out of country. I don't know, but you'll have to watch the whole thing. But so many laws were broken. Reporting misconduct is mandatory. Nobody reported misconduct. Failure to report misconduct is misconduct. The judge failed to report his attorney for not abiding by the rule of professional conduct. That's ineffective assistance of counsel. Ineffective assistance of counsel is knowingly and willingly violating the rule of professional conduct, and it's impossible just to violate one rule. When you violate one rule, you violate multiple rules. That's totally violating the preamble and anything in the scope. It's just acting totally ignorant of the rules of professional conduct. Okay, so now the judge was supposed to report your attorney for their wanton and willingly, violating the law. All those rules are laws in the court of law. It was the opposing party, state's attorney, whoever, the opposing party's legal responsibility to report that attorney for ineffective assistance of counsel. They have authorities to report them to. Okay, so everybody, the judge, the lawyer, the opposing party was supposed to cite your attorney for ineffective assistance of counsel. The state's attorney was supposed to report the judge for judicial misconduct for not reporting your lawyer. The judge was supposed to report the state's attorney as well, or the prosecuting attorney, whoever, for not reporting your attorney. Everybody's supposed to report each other as well as themselves. And anybody having knowledge of that misconduct, any lawyer or judge having knowledge of that misconduct, is supposed to report this misconduct. In this case, it is known. So, you have to turn around. Reporting misconduct is not limited to those participating in a case. Reporting misconduct is mandatory for all lawyers and judges that have knowledge of misconduct, not just in this case, in any case. And it doesn't matter what state they're in. It doesn't say except, only. No, it says reporting misconduct is mandatory. It's always said that. So you're not limited to just reporting misconduct in your court, their city, their state. It's a universal thing. Any attorney, any judge with any knowledge of misconduct by any attorney or any judge is legally required to report it. Failure to report adds to that conspiracy against rights under the color of law. Okay, getting some messages on my TikTok or something like that, I don't know. But like I said, look up where to file for conspiracy against rights under the color of law. Conspiracy against rights under the color of law complaint form. Google that. A conspiracy against rights under the color of law complaint form. Okay. Wish I had time to talk to this gentleman, and it's not because he's black, because The guy that's interviewing him is white.
I hear. So they placed me in solitary confinement. So the very next day, the marshal shows up. I'm like, what the freak is the marshals doing here? This is serious. So of course, the marshal said, well, we're here to take you to court. I said, take me to court for what? I said, well, you guys, nobody's telling me what I'm here for.
Nobody's telling them, nobody told them. I just seen this on the internet. Had to make a comment. You know, I'm just throwing laws out there, okay? That's all it is. Just throwing a bunch of laws, okay? I'm very literal when it comes to the law. That means what I see is what I go by. You know, when somebody said something, I take them for their word for word to the letter. I started studying law at a young age, and it became part of my characteristic, part of my being. Self-imposed ethic. So, like I said, ineffective assistance of counsel. Without reviewing the case, without talking to them, you know, they just came in and said, hey, you're going to go down. No, that's misconduct. They're supposed to defend him as if it was their own life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And plus, they're legally obligated to investigate the case. Everybody is, not just them, but the opposing party. And they add this to discovery, and discovery is shared between each side and the judge. Okay, remember, reporting misconduct is mandatory both in the rules of the codes. Failure to report misconduct is misconduct. That's the conspiracy against rights under the color of law. Because everybody's violating the rules and the codes. And, you know, if one reports the other, then they're going to say, well, you did it too. And once you read the rules and the codes, look up misconduct, and it'll tell you what misconduct is, and it'll tell you that if any lawyer or judge has knowledge of any lawyer or judge, you know, violating any rules, which is misconduct, it's mandatory to report them to the proper authorities. It says in the rules and the codes. I found that when I was 17. The rules of professional conduct, that's what led me to the code of judicial conduct. They're interconnected. You cannot violate the rules of professional conduct without violating the code of judicial conduct. It's impossible, but it's just that you don't know. This guy doesn't know. I feel bad for anybody that winds up in the court of law, because you literally, in order for it to proceed, they have to get informed consent. In order to get that informed consent, you need reasonable knowledge to make an informed decision, and the only way you'll receive that reasonable knowledge is to get the legal knowledge. To make an informed decision, you actually need the legal knowledge of a legal, seasoned, learned professional, a law degree. Because when these lawyers come in and just tell you, take the plea, that's automatically ineffective assistance of counsel. Them not talking to you, automatically ineffective assistance of counsel. Communication is mandatory. It says so in the rules of professional conduct. That's one of the first rules, communication. You know, expediting litigation, diligence, you know, candor towards the tribunal. There's so many things they don't do that they're supposed to do. And if anybody knows this gentleman, tell him to sit down and read the rules and the codes. Nobody does that. That's why he is where he is. I feel sorry for this man.
I'm a menace to society. How do you go from being a highly decorated officer to a menace to society? The only way you can get a Gold Cross recipient is by risking your life to save another individual's life. I risked my life doing an armed carjacking where one round went through the roof of the car. This guy, I thought it was an armed robbery. This young kid, I didn't even know what was going on. I happened to be driving down the street.
It's already on record that he's never been in trouble. They have nothing on him. But he lost everything. He lost everything. I've watched this happen to people trying to get their kids back. You know, those people in those courts don't know what due process is. They have no idea what effective assistance of counsel is. People seem to be stunned when I mention that it's guaranteed in the Sixth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Not just the Sixth, but you go into the 14th, the due process clause. Try reading the 4th, 5th, quick and speedy trial. That doesn't happen for anybody. Look up a quick and speedy trial. It has its limitations. You know how many people are sitting in prison, lack of a quick and speedy trial, are sitting in county lockup, lack of a quick and speedy trial. I only seen one case. I searched the internet, only seen one case where a judge threw out a case because the state's attorney didn't file in a timely fashion, violated the law to a quick and speedy trial. So the judge threw it out. Two guys were arrested for shooting at a FedEx driver. The guy was delivering packages. They didn't know who he was. And he had his FedEx uniform. He was actually delivering packages, truck full of packages. And these guys didn't like him in the neighborhood, so they chased him down and they shot at him, didn't hit him, but he got out of there. And I think he got fired from his job because he wouldn't go back to that area anymore. But, says he, according to the story, he was a decorated cop. Somebody was washing his car that was misplated. It was an old model, but it had different symbols on it. Led somebody to think that it was worth way more than it was. But sometimes people have a hard time understanding. I used to be called a conspiracy theorist when I was younger because I said no matter where you go, no matter what court you're in, there's always a conspiracy against rights under the color of law. If your lawyer is intentionally and willingly being ineffective assistance of counsel, that's being defective, destructive assistance of counsel. So, like I said, read the rules of professional conduct, read the code of judicial conduct. Try discussing with any lawyer, which I have many times. Well, that doesn't mean what you think it means. That would be disinformation. I'm telling you, it means anything other than what it means. That's disinformation. There's penalties for that. That's violating the letter of the law. There's penalties for that. The letter of the law requires them to do that word for word to the letter. So in the spirit of the law, I always refer to the letter of the law in interpreting any law. That way we all see say and hear the same thing. You know, like it says, cop, you know, doesn't matter who it is. You know, once the wheel's set in motion, you know, all anybody has to do is file a suit. You got to fight your way out of it. Make an accusation. You got to make your way out. You got to fight your way out of it. So in the very beginning, to make sure everything goes by the book, bring the books with you. All right? I'm talking about the rules and the codes. They don't allow electronic devices because that would make it so simple for you. They'll use them, but they won't let you. How is that in the public interest? You know, every lawyer, judge, politician, everybody in public service is required to do what's in the public interest. It's a law. So, but it even says in the rules of professional conduct, and that preamble, that everybody in the legal system are required to do what's in the public interest, not in self-interest, not parochial interest, you know, the interest of the church, or the bar. All right, there's a lot of laws you could throw at them. I just threw just a short version, what I might sit and discuss with them, given the chance, but nobody will give me the chance. I guess I'd say talk too much. But like I said, you know, to me it's just about the law, you know, getting constitutionally correct. All right? I'm talking about stopping the deprivation of rights. It's happening nationally. I've been watching the world news. It's happening internationally. We aren't the only country with corrupt politicians, corrupt public servants, corrupt lawyers and judges. And I'm not saying they all are. Far from that. If you try to sit down and talk to a lawyer or judge about the rules of professional conduct and see how they act. I've had people do it from the very beginning. Case gets thrown out quick, fast, in a hurry. And sometimes I catch people and they've been at it for a couple of years. What was supposed to happen in the very beginning didn't. So I teach them what was supposed to happen in the very beginning. They say, why am I going through this now? It's nothing but legal harassment. You know, the more you fight back because you know what they're doing is wrong, you just don't have the legal knowledge, you know, to fight back. You don't have that law degree. That violates your Fourth Amendment, you know, right to a fair trial. How is it fair? They're literally sending you to a gunfight with a knife, and a rubber knife at that. And they got them an AR-15, you know, with fully auto. I just don't want to see you get hurt. So you go into that courtroom, don't tell nobody. Bring a copy of the rules and the codes with you and highlight every issue you want to talk about that ain't happening in that court of law. You want to go over, you want to play this by the book, all right? In the preamble, the judge is legally obligated in the Code of Judicial Conduct to hear you out. So that's the first thing you want to bring out, you know. The judge will say, talk to your lawyer, you know, and then you're going to want to say, well, Your Honor, thus far my lawyer has been ineffective assistance to counsel. The Code of Judicial Conduct requires There's in the preamble where it says they're supposed to let you speak your piece. And then tell them that they're legally required by, I forgot what canon it is, 3 something, but it's the judge is legally required to cite your attorney for ineffective assistance of counsel for violating the rules of professional conduct. You know. And you can go on. I did a video on how to go on about that, but I actually had a couple videos of people saying it in court. All right, sorry, I don't mean to keep you so long. Just I felt bad, you know. Anybody that goes to court, you know, any court, any state, you know, federal, state, you know, it's hard to say who gets hit the worst, you know. And this guy's losing everything, you know. Family court, I always feel bad. I'm watching parents lose their kids. Kids lose their parents, you know, and, you know, it's just, no matter what court I try to help in, there's always a deprivation of rights, and it starts with ineffective assistance of counsel. Know your rights, know your rights, all right? That's your right, that's their constitutional duty. They don't do that, they're not being a lawyer, they're not being a judge, they're not living up to the law, you know. Not living up to the oath. Not living up to the oath, wow. Fines, the penalties are fines, removal from public service, incarceration. That's just for violating the oath. Not to mention the letter of the law, the rule of law, so many other laws I talked to you about. Nothing but peace and love to you, all right? Just looking for something to give me a little something to smile about, a little cheer. And I came across these 2 gentlemen talking, and I found it rather disappointing. Not them, but still, you know, the Almighty gave me a purpose because the Lamb showed me the light. This is the path I walk. You can't make a promise and not fulfill it. And after what I've been through, I promise the Almighty I'll do my best, you know, get things right, you know. Sure, I'm no saint. My dad used to laugh at me when I'd say that. Soy no santo. Soy no santo. I'm no saint. But I'm definitely not the Antichrist. Every day I wake, I ask myself one simple question, and it gets me through the day. What would Jesus do? And I proceed accordingly. Thank you and good night. May your Creator always be with you and rain many blessings. Long life and good health.